I had no diagnosis for a long time. I noticed dark spots in my eyes, and my GP took one look and he said, I don't know what it is.
When I had my second hip surgery, the surgeon saw that I was all black inside, and he said, "You're all black inside. Do you know anything about it?" And I said, "I have no idea."
Yeah, we've got some nice ochronosis here, this black pigment. Once it's got pigmented like that, basically all the cells inside it are dead. We always used to say it was very stiff, it's crumbly, it starts to break off. AKU is a rare disease, and so lots of doctors, lots of GPs haven't seen it, or might not even see it in their career.
It all began for me 20 years ago with the birth of my first son, Julian. Shortly after he was born, we brought him home from the clinic and we noticed that his nappies were going red-black.
That scared my parents a lot when I was young. Their first thought was, oh God, like, is he peeing blood? Like, that would be really bad. And then, you know, they saw a doctor, got misdiagnosed as red cabbage passing through my mum's breast milk into me, into my urine. And then eventually my parents weren't convinced. They saw another doctor and they got me diagnosed properly.
And they came back with this diagnosis of an ultra-rare disease, Alkaptonuria, which we call AKU. And that was really the start of the journey for us.
And this is what we found out about the disease. We found out that it's due to a single gene mutation, and because of this gene mutation, our children have a problem with this particular enzyme. So this enzyme is called homogentisate 1,2-dioxygenase, and it breaks down a substance in the body called homogentisic acid. And this acid in my children accumulates at 2,000 times the normal rate. And it binds to cartilage and bone, goes black in an oxidation process called ochronosis, and the bones go black and brittle.
Our son is now 10 years old, and he was diagnosed when he was around about 2 years old. I spoke to his paediatrician and I requested that he have a test for Alkaptonuria because we'd Googled straight away to find, basically looking at black urine, and then the first thing that came up was Alkaptonuria.
I've been suffering with back pain ever since I was about 30. People put down the fact that my pain seemed to be getting worse because I'd been looking after my wife, who was terminally ill, and looking after my sister, who had dementia as well as Down syndrome. So they thought it was possibly everything to do with stress. The diagnosis they gave me was severe osteoarthritis of the spine, and I was told then that I wouldn't work again, and that's when I was 40, and that I'd most probably end up in a wheelchair by the time I was 50. But obviously AKU hadn't been mentioned at that time, so as far as I was concerned, I had severe osteoarthritis.
My big problem was not the aesthetical things like my eyes and ears. It was my back. It was aching. I couldn't sit, and driving the car, which is my job as a car journalist, I couldn't drive for long distances without getting out and standing up and walking around a little.
So I'm basically a bionic woman because people laughed at me when I was working because I had so many parts replaced. I've had one hip replaced, one knee replaced, both shoulders have been replaced, and I've had surgery on my foot, kind of putting it back together, strengthening the bones and the cartilage in the foot.
Because it was so rare, we felt very alone, very scared, didn't quite know what to do next.
So that was in your favour. Come on, Julian. Hey! What the hell? It's not fair, is it? It is fair. It's not fair.
I think the fact that both my brother and I have this condition has oddly, I would say it's brought the family closer together. It's completely shaped my father's career.
I made contact with a patient in Liverpool called Robert Gregory, and he was just setting up a patient group called the AKU Society at the time.
Robert Gregory was a Liverpudlian who had been diagnosed with AKU when he was a child, and he came under the care of Dr. Anganath.
He said, look, I want your help there's nothing out there for patients with alkaptonuria. Can you help me set up a society for alkaptonuria? That's how I got into AKU. I had almost no knowledge of alkaptonuria when I started.
They asked me to join, and I remember going to see Bob for the first time in Liverpool, and he was quite disabled. He'd had to take early retirement from his trade union job because of his AKU, but he was very much a fighter and he really wanted to do something about it. And without him, we would never be where we are now.
One of the most important parts or aspects was actually I was introduced to a network of people that had alkaptonuria. And within that network of people, there were also other families that had already had that diagnosis. And so talking to them helped, and especially in the early days, that was a lifeline really. I have spoken to a number of families now and parents around the world when they've received their diagnosis. And so it's really good just to have that network and that support frame in place for other parents.
We did an identification program where we did a postal survey of 16,000 general practitioners in the UK. And I think there was a 16% response rate. But out of that, we managed to find about 81 people with alkaptonuria.
The three key challenges, I think, facing any rare disease patient group are fundraising, secondly, setting up the actual network, the consortium that's going to do the work, and the third thing is really working on the science and developing the science behind it.
But luckily, the European Union had a special rare disease fund. We applied to them under a project called Develop a Cure, and we were successful. Not only successful, it was the highest ranked grant, it was the top grant that was funded. And in Develop a Cure, we had partners from across the European Union. We had 3 clinical sites, Paris, Piastany in Slovakia, and Liverpool.
Through that, we identified about 1,000 plus patients around the world and around 500 people in Europe, which would come in handy.
And it was in 3 stages. The first stage was a study called SONIA 1, suitability of nitisinone in Alkaptonuria 1 on 40 patients, and that was to find out what dose was the most effective at reducing the homogenesic acid that causes all the problems in AKU.
We started, I think, in February or March in 2013, and by the year end we had finished. And then we analyzed the data and we found that 10 milligrams of nitisinone was much better than any other dose, which is what we went with for the SONIA 2 clinical trial. So the SONIA 2 clinical trial is a 4-year randomized clinical trial. We had 138 patients that we recruited, and 69 of them received nitisinone, and 69 did not receive nitisinone.
And then the third stage was a study called SOPHIA, and there patients were not given the drug. They were put through a whole bunch of tests to find out at what age the damage actually starts, and that then tells us when to start prescribing the drug. From what we've been told, this was the largest ever clinical study of an inborn error of metabolism ever done.
It was suggested that as many Welsh patients apply because you had the opportunity that you might get a chance of being given a nitisinone through the trial. So 2 of us agreed, and we went up and took part, and then when they randomised us, as chance would have it, both of us were put on the non-treatment arm.
I was called to another doctor. He said, they have a project in Liverpool. Do you want to participate? And I said, absolutely yes. And he said, I'll check it up. And that's how I came to Liverpool. That saved me.
I was teamed up with a gentleman from Spain. I was able to build a rapport up with him, even though his English wasn't any good and my Spanish was non-existent. He could hardly walk, and he wasn't much older than me. And his hands were all twisted and turned in, and he was very stiff, and he looked really depressed and very low in mood and everything. And I can remember talking to the daughter, and she was saying, you know, how he had got like that and how they'd lost their father, because he used to be a really cheerful chap and everything. Anyway, he got randomised to go on to the nitisinone. I could suddenly see a change in him, where he looked brighter and his hands began to open up, he was walking much better, and he just seemed a totally different person. The one thing I remember was the daughter saying, "We've now got my dad back." And I think that was the most important thing, and that said a lot about the drug as well, and why it was important to do the trial, really.
In June 2019, we found that nitisinone 10 milligrams was successful in treating alkaptonuria because it decreased the urine homogenic acid and gave a good clinical benefit to patients.
Thank goodness that nitisinone is around now. It's basically stopped my joints aging as fast as they were doing. I was quickly becoming more and more disabled. But now, because the nitisinone, it doesn't allow the tyrosine to break down. And so therefore, it's kind of a normal sort of aging process on my joints rather than a rapid aging process on my joints, which it was doing. And the weird thing is that as a child growing up in California, I would look out of my bedroom window and our kitchen window, and lo and behold, there was this plant growing out there called the bottle bush that was the answer to my problems that I didn't know I had. They moved from the bottle bush tree chemicals to creating a drug called nitisinone, so it's kind of come full circle. That's how, with nitisinone and the bottle bush plant, all linked into my life together forever, really.
To have the drug finally in my hand, it felt like truly having an opportunity for a normal life, like within my hands right here. This pill that I would take at first once every other day and now daily, that was enough to grant me the opportunity for a normal life.
When we got that diagnosis, we were incredibly unlucky, but very lucky at the same time. The fact that we live where we live, we are incredibly lucky that we will have access to that drug. And I think it's really important and vital that everybody worldwide has access to this drug at some stage.
This work on alkaptonuria has been the most exciting project I've been involved in, and it was towards the end of my research career. Because we've seen this go from an idea through to a small project, and then the preclinical research here, and Liverpool was the centre, the coordinator of the clinical trials. And it's quite remarkable for basic research, preclinical research and clinical trial all to be coordinated from one centre.
The AKU Society, to me, it represents hope for myself, for my brother, people with AKU, and also for people with rare genetic conditions of any kind, because it tells such a profound success story that I think it can be really inspiring to others.